Hey friends, before we dive into this week's episode, just a heads up. Our podcast talks about suicide, sexual abuse, and other trauma, and some of what you hear may be triggering, so please listen with care. This is The Survivors, real stories, raw conversations, and the truth about what it means to keep going after the hardest things. We're so glad you're here. Let's keep surviving together. So we have made it to the season 4 recap episode, and I am blown away because didn't we just start this whole season a minute ago? I don't know. It feels a little fast. A little
Didn't
fast
we
and
just
furious.
meet? I swear.
A minute ago. Yeah, I know. It feels... I talk to you more than I talk to almost anybody except Dave and my kids, but I love that because I love you, so it works. I'm totally satisfied.
The feeling's mutual, my friend.
I know. I appreciate that. You look very tan, by the way.
My kid's been in sports, softball, baseball. I spend a lot of time out in the sun.
Yeah, I'm looking a little peaked. I'm looking at my little square here. I'm not looking so hot right now, but it's okay. We'll forge on.
Looking a little pasty.
It's all right. Whatever. I'll use the
You live in a
filter.
harbor town. Why do you not? Why are you not more tan?
Because I'm editing our videos all day, every day. That's why.
That's what you need to know about my dear friend Lisa here. Is she does all the back end work of all. I just show up and talk. She does all the work behind the scenes.
Look pretty.
I got the life here.
Yeah.
And I post on her TikTok.
Yeah. No, that's very important work. Very important work. All right. So this is episode 15, season 4. We're just going to blast through and recap. And this is like the spark notes of the Survivor season 4. We give you every episode in 2 minutes or less. So when we started the season of the Survivors, we didn't just set out this season. We did not just set out to have conversations with the two of us. We've been really committed to trying to bring other voices into the podcast. And we did that, I think, really successfully this season. We'll talk about those particular episodes later, but we set out what it means to survive, but not just our own survival. We brought other people in and we talked about what other people's experiences were like too. And we talked about, of course, all the things we always talk about, which is grief and loss and trauma and change and all those moving parts. And now that we're at the end of season 4, I think for me, I don't know about you, but I think for me, what stands out the most is that surviving does not look one way. There is not one kind of survival. There are so many different ways that we can survive. And we've shared a lot of those different types of stories this season. I feel like it was a really layered season. We started pretty big. Do you remember what we started with? With kind of the weight of the world that we're all living in, and we just kind of narrowed in from there. So let's go back. Let's start talking about episode 1. At the beginning, we talked about something that I think was on everybody's mind and continues to be on everybody's mind. And that is the way that everybody was feeling about the world that we're living in right now. Like this overwhelming sense of, like, is dread too strong of a word in this moment? Like dread and fear and I think a lot of people are depressed. We're kind of surviving the weight of a really heavy world right now. And you and I realized and talked at length about the fact that people are not just stressed. Like, I never in my lifetime have experienced a period of time in history like this where it's like politically, morally, emotionally, spiritually, like everyone's surviving by a thread, I feel like. And it's not just us. It's not just this country. It's globally. And it's affected everybody.
It was like really a level of exhaustion that it just no amount of sleep could fix or can fix. But I mean, because we're still feeling it. You know, there's so much going on in the world, and it's just an incredibly difficult time for so many people. I don't know of any one person where like, yeah, everything's good, we're smooth sailing or whatever. Everybody's just dealing with something, you know, and I talked about this with a dear friend where, you know, you're dealing with, you know, say, for example, the stress of, some work stuff or whatever. And you could have a coworker, a couple cubes down, their kids in the hospital with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, you never know from day to day who the next person over is just fighting for their life just to get through the day because they've got the weight of the world on them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
it's that, but it's also the fact that we've all got this collective grief of what's happening to, in our case, our country, our political system, our divided country. People are on one side, it seems, or the other, and that's that's layered on top of everybody's stuff, everybody's day-to-day stuff.
And that's torn people, families apart. When there's a differing, I think I remember you in this episode where you were somebody that you love dearly had mentioned their political stance on something, and it just shifted. Like, wow, I don't know that I can continue having a safe relationship with you with your perspective.
Well, and it was the way that the person shared their perspective. It was the hostility that came out of this person. I never would have suspected it. It was such a benign, innocuous, like, catch up, haven't seen you in ages, how are you? And then out of nowhere, this person was just spewing politics in a way that was so completely out of context. And I was really not only shocked, but scared and sad at the same time. And I really did my best to just say, let's agree to disagree and step out of that conversation. And this person did not want to let go. They were like a pit bull on my leg. And it just made me realize in that moment, I'm glad you brought that up, because it made me realize in that moment that we are living in a very, very divided and scary world. And it's hard. So that was the way we kicked off the whole season, which I actually think, ironically, unfortunately, that was the way to kick off the season, because it was like on everybody's minds and still is. So then we rolled into season 2. I'm sorry, into episode 2. And that was all about compound grief, which you and I both, but you even more so, have a lot of experience with, when grief is just layered and layered and stacked until your system is just completely maxed out and you can't function under the weight of it. You actually offered a lot of insight into what that's like because of what you've dealt with in your life. Can you give the 2-second version of what compound grief means to you?
Well, I've lost 5 brothers to suicide, my dad to cancer. Those are the deaths. It's grief of a lost childhood that I didn't get to have because I was sexually abused as a toddler, basically, being raised in a cult. And it's so multifaceted. And the older I get, it's so weird how I don't. It's like the more things happen and you feel like you get stronger with time, but it's almost as if the older I get, the less capacity I have because the weight is so much, and my husband and I were talking the other night, and he told me, he said, sometimes I don't know how it is that you carry the weight of what you do. And I commend you for carrying through and remaining as positive as you do through it all. And
it's a lot. It is a lot for any one human to live underneath the weight of all that. So that was a powerful conversation for me, just in the context of understanding what it must feel like to live underneath that. So
and you had just lost your mother-in-law.
My mother-in-law.
Recently.
Yep. And we were dealing with moving both sets of parents into independent living communities, and then my mother-in-law got sick, and it was a lot of stress, a lot of grief in a very short period of time. So it was an important conversation to have, because it doesn't necessarily just mean the grief of losing a human that you love. Like you said, it could be the grief of a lost childhood or an ended relationship, or grieving a job that you lost, or, you had to leave a friendship, or all of those things. So it was an important conversation to have. And from that, we moved into we talked a lot about breaking mental health taboos, like saying the things that we're not supposed to say, because silence just does not help us survive at all. We've talked about that a lot. It isolates us. I feel like that was the episode. Was that the episode where you talked about what was going on with you? Was that the episode?
No, it was episode 3 where we talked about breaking mental health taboos.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's what I just said. Yeah.
Yeah. And where I opened up about how I had been having suicidal ideations and, and I said this to George, there are very few days in my life where the thought doesn't pass through my head.
Mm-hmm.
Just a singular thought sometimes.
What is the thought?
It's almost,
you feel like sharing it?
Of that life would be, that I'm tired.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know that I have the strength to carry on and live this life, that I would just like to rest and rest by death, because that is the only way that I know how that I could ever fully, truly rest. And there are very few days where something along those lines doesn't pass through my head.
And that's passive ideation. That is passive ideation, where you don't have a plan and you don't have a timeline, but you have those fleeting thoughts. And I think it was such a powerful, one of the most powerful episodes that you and I have ever recorded, because as I mentioned before, during that episode, I had no idea in that moment, at that time when you and I were recording that episode live together, I had no idea that you were in the place that you were in. I knew that you had been, struggling with some things, and that you had been, kind of exhausted emotionally and physically and all that, but I had no idea. So that was a very, very big surprise to me, that you were where you actually were emotionally. And the temptation to kind of hit the pause button and take you offline and be like, okay, let's talk about this offline. That was a very real consideration in my brain at that time. But then you and I both kind of, I feel like we were connected in that moment, and we were both like, nope, we need to have this conversation right here and now, because not only was it helpful for you, but I think it was helpful for other people hearing it, to be like, okay, this is really happening, and this is happening to people everywhere. And we need to be able to talk about the taboo things out in the open, even the hard, scary, ugly ones, to create more space. The more we do it, the more space is created to keep doing it. So that was unbelievably brave of you to have that conversation. And I'm just grateful it was the conversation you needed to have in that moment.
Well, thank you, most importantly, though, for holding that space for me. I don't know a lot of people that are able to hold that space for me very well, because again, I have been struggling with suicidal thoughts since I was 11 years old. So that's the vast majority of my life, as I am now approaching my 40th birthday.
Yeah.
41st birthday.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're already 40. Don't try and rewind the clock there, dear. All right. So then we jumped into episode 5, which was also a really powerful conversation. It was about women, specifically women. And
you're skipping an episode. Episode 4, body control and coping.
Did I? You're
How
so
stress
right.
and trauma show up physically through sleep, food habits, daily habits, and gentle ways to regulate.
I just deleted an entire episode. Didn't I? Look at that.
You
did. My God. Thank God for you keeping me honest and on track. Wow. I shouldn't even be. I should just quit.
No.
I'm kidding. You're right. We talked about how all of this shows up in the body, because survival is not just an emotional thing. It is very, very much a physical thing that can take a huge toll on us in ways that we know and can see, and in ways that we don't know. I mean, we lose sleep and we're irritable. We lose appetite, or we binge. it affects our habits. So the bottom line is that our bodies keep the score. And we had a really powerful conversation about what that often looks like and why we need to be, like you always say it, we need to be listening to our bodies all the time.
And there's a tremendous amount of research coming out about the fascia, which is it's a layer between our muscles and our skin, but it's called fascia. And that is where our emotional dysregulation is stored. Do some research on it, but that's where it's all stored. And different traumas can store in different parts of your body. Yeah, I've been listening to some podcasts and doing some research on it. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
All right, now you're going to have to make me listen and do my own research too.
Well, and also there's a great YouTube channel called The Human Garage. And he goes through these physical movements that you can do specifically for your fascia to release said trauma. And they have workshops and things that you can do, but they do have a YouTube channel where you can, because who's got thousands of dollars to go to a retreat?
Right.
So let's get some stuff for free off YouTube.
Okay.
Check
I'm
it
all
out.
for it. I'm all for it.
The Human Garage.
All right. We'll try and remember to put that in the show notes as well. So then episode 5 was women and suicide. And that was a really important conversation, I think, because we don't often talk just specifically. Obviously, you and I are women and we're moms and we work. And we talked an awful lot about the kinds of stress that women are under, we talked a lot about that invisible load that our families don't often see that we're lifting all the time, and the emotional labor that we're constantly dealing with, and that pressure to hold everything together, and what that's like, what surviving that is like, because holding everybody up, as well as I do, we're both moms, holding everybody else up while we are barely standing up ourselves is a really tough position to be in.
And being, for the first time really being a working mom, damn, that is hard. Being a full-time mother is hard too, but juggling, trying to keep the home and the kids and going to work, and there's just not a lot left at the end of the day.
No.
And then the single mothers out there, just mad respect, but women are superheroes, and I don't care who hears that, but women are superheroes because we do a hell of a lot to hold this world together, and we are not given enough recognition for it.
Hey, it's Lisa Sugarman, co-host of The Survivors and founder of the HelpHUB. If you're listening right now and you're not okay, if you're feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or like you're carrying more than you can handle, please know you don't have to go through it alone. You can call or text 988 or chat online at 988lifeline.org to connect with trained counselors like me who are there to listen and support you in the moment. Reaching out is a brave first step, and you owe it to yourself. Because your life matters, your story matters, and help is always just 3 numbers away.
Amen. Couldn't agree more. You're right. You're absolutely right. So speaking of powerful, superhuman women, now we talk about episodes 6 and 7, because we've done a couple of 2-parters this season. Both of those 2-parters, we were very lucky doing them with people that I love very, very much. So the first 2-parter, episode 6 and 7, we welcomed my mom on the pod for the very first time. That was a really super personal conversation for me. You got to meet her for the first time, and now you're adopted. Now you're my sister. And these conversations were just so meaningful to me, because for those who don't know my story, I lost my dad when I was 10 years old. The story I was told by my mom was that he died of a heart attack. He did not. I found out 35 years later that he actually took his life. And she and I lived with that version of my father's death, which was not the truth, for 35 years. She kept that secret to save me from that pain. And she sat down with us and she talked in 2 incredibly deep and candid episodes about all of it, openly, about the day my father died, and about the day that secret came out, and about everything that's happened since then. And it really, to me, was one of the most powerful conversations that we've had on the podcast. And I was just so grateful for people to get to know her. She is extraordinary. And I don't just say that because I am so unbelievably biased, because I was raised by a single mom, and my mother is superhuman, and nobody has more respect for her than I do. So it was a joy to have her on this podcast. And then we slid right into another beautiful conversation, also very powerful, with one of my oldest and dearest friends since we were 12, 13 years old, my friend Caleb Powers. And Caleb came on the podcast, also his first time not only on the podcast, but it was his very first time talking about his story. And he spent 2 episodes with us reflecting on a lot of different trauma. He also has everybody has such a story, and I was there for Caleb's in 1983 when we were in school together. We were best friends, and his father was a merchant marine, and he was at sea a lot, and he was lost at sea in a very famous shipwreck called the SS Marine Electric that went down off the coast of Virginia. He was the chief engineer on that boat, Richard Powers, and my friend Caleb was supposed to be on that boat. He was supposed to go down and spend a weekend with his dad and travel in the boat, the ship. It's a 800-foot tanker all the way from Virginia to Boston. And his dad at the very last minute said, "Caleb, you can't come because the weather's going to be terrible and there's no place for you." And the ship went down. And so Caleb not only lost his father, but has had to live with the fact that he was supposed to be on that boat too. And he shared some unbelievably powerful moments from his father being in the water with other survivors and not making it and saving other crew members, and how Caleb's life, that was powerful, talking about how his whole life imploded, and he went into rehab and he got clean and sober and has been clean and sober for 40 years and is just a remarkable human now. And
I loved when he shared the part how he had lunch with the person that saw the last person to see his dad alive.
I know. Of all things to have his name is Gene Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
And he is one of the only 3, I believe there were 34 men on the boat and 3 survived. Caleb's father was not one of them. And at the end, there were 5 men on a life ring in freezing cold, 28-degree temperature water in Virginia. And this man, Gene Kelly, was with Caleb's dad. And Caleb's dad was holding a tankerman's light to shine it in the air as a beacon. And Caleb's father didn't make it. He passed away and was lost at sea. And Gene Kelly grabbed that tankerman's light and shined it in the air. And the Coast Guard found them because of that. And Caleb ended up meeting this man and getting to spend time with him. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That was a really...
So they never recovered his dad's body?
No. No.
Even though it was off the coast?
Yeah, it was never recovered.
I never asked him that.
I don't, not to my knowledge. If it was, I never knew that. Yeah. Big funeral in Boston. It was all over the news. It was a big deal, and it completely reformed the way that the U.S. Coast Guard and Navy handles their safety protocols. It was because of that shipwreck. So, yeah, that was a deep one. That was a deep, heavy, emotional one for me too. And then we went from there straight into episode 10, which was you. That was a story about another way that you have survived. Do you remember what that episode was about?
Yeah, losing 100 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's no small feat.
That's a human.
That is a human.
My 12-year-old son doesn't even weigh 100 pounds.
Oh my God, you need to feed that boy more. But I mean, yeah, on the surface, that was about weight loss, which is so dramatic that you lost 100 pounds. But on underneath the surface, that's about survival. That's about protecting yourself and your mental health and wellness, because your body was not the body that you wanted it to be, and that affected everything, right?
Well, yeah, and it also, I had to look at it in ways of what I had been through contributed to gaining that much weight, and that my body already, because of all of the trauma that I had been to, it was stacked against me. Because, people that have experienced one traumatic event, their lifespan reduces by 20%. And I've had God knows how many. And I knew that if I did not make a change, that I was not going to live to be very old. And I knew that I had to make some sort of drastic change. I was fortunate that the first 50 pounds came off relatively easy in just cleaning up my diet and, getting off some antidepressant medications that were making me gain weight and eat endlessly. But then also using some intervention from, GLP-1 medication. There's a lot of negative stigma about people using that medication. And you know what? That medication is saving people's lives. And, I use it as a tool. I've been on it for 2 years now, and I don't know how long I'll be on it, but I use it as a tool. And, I have endured enough in my life. And if I need to use something that will help me not overeat, because eating is my addiction, and that is what I have used to cope with so much shit. And I'm incredibly grateful for it.
Well, I'm incredibly proud of you, because that, not only to do that is such a massive feat, but to talk about it. Like, it's very brave to go out there and be like, hey, look, I lost 100 pounds and I'm on this medication, and I needed to do that for my mental and physical wellness. Like, that's a big deal. So I was so glad that you wanted to share that. I would think that was a really powerful episode for a lot of people. Then from there, we hopped to episode 11. And that episode we called it the things grief changes forever. And what we talked a lot about was, once you cross over into that space of now grieving, we talked about like the before you're that person, and then the after when you're that person, and how we essentially become someone very different. And there is a lot of radical acceptance built into that, where, we're now surviving grief that will be with us forever. No matter what happens in our life going forward, that grief and that loss is always there in one form or another. And it alters the version of ourselves. And we kind of talked about that, about losing that version of ourselves and kind of having to rebuild and integrate that loss into the rest of our lives. And I feel like that was a really powerful conversation, because so many people are affected by so many different kinds of grief that alter their experience of how they see the world and how they live their life. So I think that was an important one.
Well, and coming to terms with the person that you have to become after loss, after whatever, a traumatic event or whatever, coming to terms and accepting that new version of yourself is incredibly important.
It is. It absolutely is. And then from that episode, we jumped to episode 12, which was a very, very exciting episode for me. Here, I'll do a shameless plug.
Absolutely.
This is what the episode was all about. So this is, for any of you who are seeing this on clips, you'll see I'm holding up a copy of my book that just came out on April 28th. It's called Surviving Finding Hope After Suicide Loss. And we talked a lot about the origin of that book. Why did I write it? What was that book about? It came to life because of my story of losing my father twice. I lost him when I was 10 in 1978 to a heart attack. That's at least the story I was told, which I found out 35 years later was not the truth. My dad died by suicide, and I learned that as a 45-year-old mother of two. And this book is a 6-year-long project, the kind of culmination of that project. And it's my memoir, of course, losing him twice. And it's also part field guide, part mental health resource directory and a toolkit. And it's something that I've spent a lot of time and emotional labor on. And it's out in the world. and it's something I'm incredibly proud of. My mom is a part of this book, which is the most wonderful part of the whole experience for me. Not only did I record the audiobook of the book myself, but my mother is integrated into every chapter of the book. And she is also in the audiobook as well. Her voice is in the audiobook. And so the whole thing has been just a beautiful experience for me. And it's out in the world now. It's Kindle, Audible, paperback, all the ways that you can read it. And it's something that I really, really hope and pray will find its way into the people's hands who need it most. People who are, of course, surviving suicide loss, which is 94 million of us around the world every year are touched by suicide loss. So I hope it finds its way to those people, and also just generalized grief and loss and mental health and wellness. So we talked all about that, and you gave me the space to use a whole episode to talk about that. And I'm grateful to you for that, because it's my baby, and it's like having a baby. Dave was so funny when the books arrived, when my author copies arrived, and I opened the box of all the books. He looked at me and he's like, "Wow, that's the longest pregnancy you ever had." You know, it took like 6 years to write this book from like concepts to book in hand. He's like, "That was a long pregnancy."
That is funny. I love that.
Yeah, but it's out in the world, and you can find it everywhere that books are sold. And from there, we jumped into Mental Health Awareness Month. And we talked about, oh no, we didn't. We talked about Mother's Day first. That's right. Didn't we? We talked about Mother's Day first. And the challenge of experiencing Mother's Day.
Sorry, I'm adjusting my light here.
Oh, yeah, of course. We talked about the two very different kinds of Mother's Day experiences that you and I have. I have a very close bond with my mom, and we're extremely present in each other's lives. And you don't have the same relationship. You have no contact with your mom, and have for several years. And it's a very different experience. And it just goes to show that all of these days that are designed to be celebratory days are not always celebratory for everybody.
Yeah. And allowing space to feel the holiday, whatever that holiday is. You know, this one was particularly about Mother's Day. And, you know, feel the loss of whatever it is you're dealing with, but also trying to be present in the moment. And it's okay for those two things to exist at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
As a lot of what a grief and healing journey looks like is allowing two separate emotions or feelings to exist in the same moment.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And from there, we slid right into Mental Health Awareness Month. We slid right into a beautiful conversation. It's actually a really, really powerful conversation, I think, about how do we take acknowledgement of our mental health and talking about mental health, which we're all doing, and it's in the mainstream and it's become more acceptable. How do we take that and put it into action? What do we say to actually help people? Like we're there to post the posts and share the videos and to say I'm not okay, but then what happens after that? What are we doing ourselves to communicate that we're not okay? And what are we doing as people who are trying to support the people who are not okay? So you and I did almost some role playing really about like, what's a crisis call like? Like if somebody comes to you and says, I'm not okay, I want to take my life, or I'm having suicidal thoughts, like, okay, what do you do? And you and I talked in depth about that. And I think that was a really powerful conversation that I would really encourage anybody to listen to. Because if you're not sure how to handle someone in crisis or yourself in crisis, this gives you some actionable tips on how to do that. And we were really honest and open in a way to hopefully create more space for people to be honest and open and act in the ways that are beneficial when you need help. And then we are here now, episode 15, final reflection. And it's just so hard to believe that another season has come and gone. And I'm so proud of what we're doing, what we're putting out into the world, and the conversations that you and I are having, and the fact that we're creating a community. I mean, there are so many people who are reaching out to you and I offline saying, like, we're so grateful to be part of the community that you're building, because we're so much less alone, and we feel supported and we feel validated. And that's the whole point. It's really the whole point. It's why you and I are doing this. And we will be back next Wednesday, right on time, with season 5. And it's going to have a whole new lineup of conversations. We're bringing more guests and different voices and different experiences onto the pod, building on that even more than we did this season. So if you are not already subscribed to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you get your content, please click subscribe so that you never miss a conversation. We don't want you to miss a single thing. And if you have gotten something meaningful out of one of the conversations that we've had this season, one or many of the conversations, please, please, please take 60 seconds, 90 seconds, and drop us a review. You cannot imagine how much that kind of feedback helps us to know that we're reaching the people we want to reach. So we would just appreciate any kind of feedback that we can get. So for me, for myself, Nash, thank you as always for just being the person doing this with me. I love and appreciate you, and I love these conversations, and I can't wait to pick it up again next season.
Thank you. I really am truly honored to be doing this work with you. It's invaluable, and making the world a better place is something that I have been very passionate about and wanting to do for a long time, and you've finally given me that opportunity with this podcast. So thank you.
Well, that is entirely my pleasure, because you just took that chance and ran with it, and I can't wait to just continue on. So we will be back next Wednesday, kicking off season 5. Until then, you know the drill. Keep surviving.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening and for being part of the Survivors community. No matter where you are in your story, you're not alone, and you're definitely not broken. Healing takes time, and it looks different for everyone. The fact that you're still here and still trying means you're already doing the hard work. If something in today's conversation resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too. That's how we keep these conversations going and remind each other that there's always hope.
And if you or someone you know is struggling, please remember, help is always out there. You can call or text 988 anytime to reach a trained crisis counselor like me. And for more mental health resources, tools, treatment options, and content to support your mental health, visit thehelphub.co. We're so grateful you're part of the Survivors family, and we'll be back next week with another honest conversation about life after the hardest things. Until then, take care of yourself and your people, and keep surviving.